Also, imagine this part of Adam trying to find Eve, and with so many things of crossing lines and always, having this whole split of universe and messing with it as far as science and everything, trying to figure out all that on a good and bad note, you end up having the multi universe stuff. And, every time that this thing is in range of going play by play, as far as, what's going to happen to the earth, as well as giving us signs, you'll see, like, for instance, all the movies rolled out perfectly in the sense of where this Adam is, looking like human, but he's half archangel, half mortal. His eyes, his mind, everything is adaptable to realize what are these signs about? Why are these movies, the science, everything is so perfect on depth and precision that it centers me to actually follow through with the link that it comes from, adapting and being rewired to know that there's something up. So that whole part of being able to see stuff like all of these movies that are coming out perfectly to explain part of multi-universe, I'm able to explain the rest. At the end of the movie where they were on the Flash, where he was running around too fast, and it's in the future, it would have never got to that sense, even if there was superheroes, because right when he was explaining the multi-universe part with the spaghetti, it should have already been coming to that part where everything started blowing up, atoms and elements, atomic mass of all elements. And that's what happened every time with Big Bang Theory. So the next time the Earth renewed, there was proof of Big Bang theories. And that's why you got to be aware of how scary that is if someone that is eternal never got to uh, evolve high enough to become infinite. And, so there's two sides, male and female, infinite and eternal. And with me being changed, it's like where Eve didn't have to always restart and have her whole oracle part of freaking out and having to, commit suicide in order to go to the dead side, and her being eternal, go through so much to try to evolve. While the male side, always been here mammal, the Wolverine crying to the moon, uh, the guy that's carrying the woman and asking God to make them both two mountains. Everything is spiritual, everything is that magical. And it always shows how man was always God, but it's always God that is only infinite to keep coming back in forms of mankind. So with man and female, as far as both being two sides of, you know, the color purple being red and blue, or, yin and yang, or night and day, life and death, it's that part where they need each other. And with everybody's family myths and stories, as far as they were thinking that they weren't real, they were just, campfire stories, it's that truth that I give everybody, the truth about how, it's Adam telling this story. And he's had to, on many lives of being infinite, coming back, coming back, coming back, every time that they did this Genesis and nobody noticed, they're replaying the lives of everybody that I knew. I mean, every single neighbor in this block has already been there where I seen them perish and then live their life and then start, and then again it perished going backwards, And everybody has became more and more and more asleep, not really paying attention to the Word of God, God's teachings. It just got changed rapidly in every form to make sure that everybody's paralyzed, not awakened. So with Adam being out here, he's had to just deal with the frustration of what was trying to destroy him, what was trying to set him up, make him look odd or weird or, not accepted, when really only when he was not bridging that resurrection, he was perfectly fine with people accepting him. But subliminal messages and, memories of the past really were asleep deep down inside. So it had to deal with all these numbers are important. If you know about anything with paranormal, superstition, biblical, spiritual, tarot, or even angel numbers, you'll notice the numbers 4, 5. You'll notice 5 and 6. You'll notice 6 and 7, or 5 and 7. You'll notice 13, 12, and 11. You notice how 9 is 10 and all that story right there too. You'll notice 13 being like 4, death or Satan's number. You'll notice how Jesus was the 13th person standing there at the Last Supper. You'll notice how a lot of things of Friday the 13th, the Knights of the Templar, how many stages there are in human evolution from the primate and caveman stage or whatever. You'll notice how there's always those numbers in sequence of everything that you get taught, along with the numbers 21, 23, 27, 30, 32, 33, 34, and also 40. Those are very important numbers, and also 64 and 66. These are crazy, crazy numbers. And again, with the 999 or 99 or 99999, you always remember that there's one missing to not complete it. So with NASA and all of this, your 40101, 101 times, you know, you'll have the circle of life with a pillar that's separating it from the other side, and there's another circle of life being the earth. So you have 010. I mean, these are things that ancient tribes and cultures and, all the people that were scholars have been working on both night and day. And the reason why we had like the brethren of the Greek brethren of the council that had like 7 people, they were down deep in the ground only when they were trying to make sure that nature and all of the circle of life wasn't able to hear them start up this huge, huge, um, trial of trying to destroy God and take his place along with the influence that reached them. So I try to teach you all about that. Catholic churches and all that, when it talks about them reaching the poor people in the slums that were dying from diseases, that was all their experimentation, acting like if they were good and they didn't know what was going on. But they wanted to make sure that they bridged the science as far as something ill and evil that could take on good and cleanliness. If you want to look at those as far as, elements they scoop up from the atmosphere for the hot air balloons and stuff like that, as they scraped it, they look under microscopes and they say these are living organisms. It shows you how we have so many bridges of elements, containment, and evolution, and messengers of all sorts that play a big, huge part in the bacteria, the chemicals, the elements, the mass, the radiation, the frequency, the sonic, the boom, the bang, everything. Cutting wormholes into time, making black holes. You have to realize this is all responsibility not of God no more, but of God's teachings through, the few people that really kept making a difference to help bridge this atom wake up at 21st century and explain it to you all. You know, you can't do it on your own if you are not all together. You can't do it on your own if nobody is able to have the power of belief and faith and come together and really understand this. I mean, where did you get the butterfly effect? How did it come to where, if you look at the science, there's one cure and one disease, one poison, one death, as far as left and right? When things separate, purge and merge, you'll see the differences. And when they were originally natural, the butterfly didn't, or the fly, didn't have any of these properties. You'll see that the black widow never used to eat the man spider after mating. He would always be able to jump off when the earth was one big natural, because she already had a bunch of flies and stuff in webs. So when things go unnatural, you pay attention to all nature. How, for instance, we doubled and tripled on humans as well as all of the trees. And as the trees are supposed to manifest and change, like, evolution was, you'll see that we also have not only the type that mankind made, but the type that evolved on their own. And they're not so much for eating, but they're more for, medicines and trying to protect us again. So nature, the universe, everything has been watching, trying to help, but it's been getting weakened and poisoned. So I have my understanding of where I'm supposed to be: a warrior, protector, guardian, and being a king. But prophecy is not being seen completed here based on conquer and divide and everybody playing dumb when really they either, you know, deserve to fight for God or they're slaves for, of course, again, the name not Satan, but the one that Satan tried to pretend to be as far as, demon kings and cancer and half living, half dead, trying to kill everything. Because, like I said, if you have something that is completely dead, it doesn't move, it doesn't grow. If you have something that is partially alive, it will spread and it will make constant um, infection and people, get sick and die, and it becomes heretic as well as a plague, just like COVID was, Not only does it get put in shots and things to activate, but it also shows how something that's supposed to be dead is not dead. So cancer is technically not death. It is half dead, and all it knows how to do is kill and eat. And mankind is responsible for that, along with all the other half dead parasites that like to just feed and kill. Bacteria was supposed to be bacteria where it didn't live, only viruses did. But science and all of these places have made a bacteria that lives in its own throw up, its own pee, its own poop, and it gets bigger and bigger. Another part of that bacteria needing a host is where you find the catacombs filled with all kinds of skeleton bones. And you find that was a spot where a lot of people did experiments as well as research. And they had all of their scroll type of holders filled with where the bones are like in pockets, you put your checks or the keys into those little cubes, like right there behind the register. Well, if you look at the catacombs, you'll see how everyone stuck bones into them. Well, that's where they used to have their scrolls. So, again, being undercover as far as awakening, and instead of being noticed when I was awake earlier, I got to get to the age 36, which has a lot to do with everybody's scrolls and teachings of 666 and how they manipulate God needing to wake up. And they always said, that's the devil. And then we always had these chapters 1 through 6, and then Genesis restarted. So it's biblical, it's scientific, it's mathematic, it's historical, it's research that everyone needs to conduct and pay attention to. Because so far I've seen too many people like robots that got taught this, that, that's separate. As soon as they try to, you know, have everything work in their favor to study and think of, they actually go bonkers and they get mad and confused. So the similarity of a robot not being able to comply all of this data that helps them, just detach from a computer system, it's the same as everybody that's, taught wrong throughout ages and they didn't know, it's not their fault, as well as being possessed, as well as being programmed, as well as being manipulated, belittled in all those different ways that psychology and everything formats part of this whole execution of trying to destroy God and his creation. Me being right here, I've been trying my best to get people to understand that. And even with me looking crazy, doing my little speeches without recording like I am now, I've had to constantly look at the test and see how many people were like, oh, he's out there talking to himself, or, things like that. Sometimes it's not here, sometimes it's another earth, the ones that I'm connected to every Genesis. So where there was people that are not there and they're like talking, I'm like, I already know about this whole supernatural duality slash multi-universe 1,000 times over, billions of times reality and duality. That's where somebody needs to keep their cool to understand what's going on. Others, they're not so fortunate. They get drugged and diseased and all this stuff to program themselves to go crazy around someone like me in order to make me have to get yelled at and said, you're all the same, you're going crazy, whatever, let's put you in a nut house. But constantly, I've proven that I wasn't crazy. And now I've been doing nothing in the sense of just watching my back, paying attention to my surroundings, but letting everybody know on YouTube and all the frequency channels of hearing me, I have to play that part of prisoner. Like if I was just throwing a rock against a wall, or scratching numbers to just count the days that I've been imprisoned, when really I've been doing all this research and stuff. Man time looking at a dirty magazine or something. That God never really said, like, don't make anything to remind you of someone that you miss, but people put that out of whack. I mean, don't don't lust, don't be married, being sharing one skin, and try to flirt and cheat around. But if we're in a spot where you can't find your soulmate that fast, you have too many things getting in the way, roadblocks, blockers, etc., then that's part of also the evil that is constantly trying to get in every single slip and groove to stop us from all coming together and being happy. So, of course, I'll be looking like if I'm just some older dude that's crazy out there or whatever. But subliminal messages all the time show, you know, guardians or angels or even God playing the part of an old homeless guy and, trying to just get mankind to fall in together to help each other rather than be separated and constantly a stress on the higher parts of, the Almighty. So, Adam wants to find Eve in the 21st century, and manipulations galore have been in the way. And so, with yin and yang being life and death, being made into in a curriculum, but then you split them in halves, it's not going to be day and night separated. It's going to be the portions. So 50% of 100, you're still going to have, you know, one half the size of a yin yang on the left and one size of a yin yang on the right. And both of those being like the cure and the whole part of all the science and, fairy tale and prophecy and everything coming together is where this Adam and Eve that started the beginning of the whole being on the tree of life, ninth floor, ninth heaven. And, now it needs to get to that part where it's finally bridging those two together to make a seed of life that is the full part of the cure, you know. Hybrid stages of all galore different universes, all collected in spirit. And it's the spirit side that has to give permission for any of those lab uh, experiments to actually fall through to be a complete success. With that being against me so long, I have not ever given my approval. And so far, we've made zombies, werewolves, freaking Jersey bat, Bigfoot. You think that those are all lies, but what about witches? What about skinwalkers? What about demons? What about titans? You know, Not one thing exists and the rest doesn't exist. It's all depending on how strong your mind is to not actually be part of a battery. And when you put all these batteries or these components that have, electricity power together and you like right away just turn on the switch for them all to work, you end up trying to make a Frankenstein, right? So with minds not even being connected like, transformers or batteries or, wires and cables from different outlets, they still conduct the same experiments as far as trying to give life to Frankenstein. So if people believe in this person or that person, then, of course, they're going to keep walking the earth trying to find a way to really get everyone to understand everything, life and death. And instead of having life and death, instead of having cancer or sickness or possession, being possessed, people doing crimes, like I said, SOS, Summer Sam, Hillside Strangler, freaking billions of people, you know, throughout history. If you don't want any of that craziness in anything or anyone getting hurt, it's that part where people need to believe, pray, as well as let the rest of this experimentation of trying to, get everyone together happen, especially with this Adam being Victorial, needing to find his Eve being Emily. And every other universe of futuristic scientific technology and bridging everything to be part of watching us and messing with us, it needs to just all come together as far as everybody, every planet, every solar system, every universe, every cosmos. Everything God's in God's creation needs to really come together.